You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. The Bloomberg reported this week that Ghana sold Sub-Saharan Africa's longest ever Eurobond, as part of a 3 billion deal that was almost 5 times oversubscribed. Almost 5 times oversubscribed. So that has been the celebration elsewhere and back home. So despite Airbus scandal, there appears to be some confidence in the Ghanaian economy. But what does that mean for you and I? What does that mean for the country's debt sustainability levels? The World Bank has warned that our debt risk is still very high. So we will find out what this actually means and how it translates into your pocket, so to speak. And then the president, in his Christmas message, promised that if you were part of those who have lost your money, savings in the financial institutions that went down, I mean the microfinance institutions, 340 plus of them, you will get a full refund, not the 10,000 and the 20,000 that was being paid and has been paid. Where is that money coming from? And how far are we about that? We set up an FX development committee, and it drew a lot of criticism even from experts, professors of economic professors. What was that about? The finance minister co-chairs that committee with the central bank governor. He'll explain to us if that was not a sign that he's lost control over the city. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning,
Mr. Ken
Samson.
ofori-atta.
It's great to be here, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you also.
Great.
Right. So, basics. Start with, we went on a road show, and we have been able to raise money, 3 billion. What's that money for in the first place, and why are we excited about it?
Well, Samson, I mean, I think it was quite an experience being there. Money, of course, was in the budget because we ran a budget deficit, so you raise money on the local treasury market and also internationally as you balance between foreign exchange depreciation and the cost of borrowing. So that leads us there. Then you begin to talk about the response from investors to your sovereign paper. And I think that's what we went through this time. Remember last year, we also issued $3 billion to some pretty rave reviews. It was a difficult period because Argentina was going down, we were exiting the IMF, and investors were a little nervous about that. But even with that, there was such a great show of support. And we got money at the lowest rates ever. This time around, $3 billion. And we got a 15 billion response from the international capital markets, which, as you rightly said, is 3 times what we wanted, and the lowest rates in our history. This was, fortunately for us, Moody's had come in around January 24th, giving us a positive outlook, which was really very good. And then we decided to test the market with the longest bond in Africa's history, which was 41 years. And amazingly, Samson, that one, we took $750 million from that. That one had an 8 times oversubscription, which is really indicative of the confidence that the market has in how we are managing the economy and how things are going. I think one thing that was really jarring, if you look at the 6-year that we had in the previous government in 2016, that came in at about 9.250. And the 6-year that we launched this year was 6.3750. So something, imagine, let's say $1 billion in finance, that's about 300 basis points difference, which means that every year is a $30 million saving, and that's 180 million over the period. So you just, when you juxtapose it, you just see sort of how far the country, or we as Ghanaians, have come with regards to the market's response to what we have done these 3 years as a nation, and therefore the continual drop in the cost of capital for us. And I think in as long as, I mean, every country borrows. You know, Japan is over 100%, US, I don't know, maybe 300%. So it's not really the issue of not borrowing. Where do you go to get the best resources for your country at any point in time?
So we got this at the cheapest rate ever in this country's borrowing history.
That's correct, yeah.
And that means what?
Well,
why?
I gave you.
I mean, why?
Yeah,
why are we getting it that?
I don't know. I mean,
way?
Certainly, firstly, it reduces your cost of capital, and I gave you the example of the 6-year bond, 2016, and what we have now. So that's important.
What will account for, you know, our competitiveness?
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, if you look in 2017, when the government came in, I think the first one to come around as they saw our plans and strategy for the economy was, I believe, Fitch or so, which sort of brought us to stable. It had long in coming. Then in October 2018, S&P actually upgraded us to a B, which was great. And then Moody's January 20. So you can see a belief in the management of the economy. And this whole thing, something is about how do you manage this economy such that you build confidence in areas that will give you the resources you need. Something, I mean, be it as it may, and it's not perfect, but when you bring inflation down from 15.4 to single digit of 7.9, it means something.
Okay.
You know, when your growth moves from an anemic 3.4% to literally an average of 7% over the period, that's twice or double. That must mean something. You look at your deficit, and you move from 7.8 to where we are, where we have actually capped it to below 5. That means something. So that becomes the issue of market stability.
Right.
But then going forward is an assessment that is this sustainable, you know, and
but
that is
are
where
we also credit worthy now as we celebrate that, also because of what we did with the World Bank?
And what do you mean by what we did with the World Bank?
So the IMF, our plan was to get a certain confidence into our economy.
Yeah.
And so you came in and you managed very quickly to get us off.
Yeah.
How does that play into how we have become, as you may say, credit-worthy?
Yeah, I think, you know, you remember last year, first quarter, when the currency really was doing cartwheels on us because the international market was worried about imminent exit from the fund. And President Akufo-Addo has said, we need to get out of this.
Okay.
You know, so we committed to do that, and we rode that tide. But even then, at that April, when we went to the market, there was, you know, a positive response to it. So the fund, I mean, the fund is very clear about sort of the macroeconomic strategies that we put in place, and are warning us about debt distress. Not that you are distressed, but warning you to be careful about that. So I think, yes, being able to execute a plan right from January 2017, declaring that we'll exit the fund, and doing it was good. But we didn't sort of leave the fund without we ourselves putting certain buffers in place, which was going to Parliament and, you know, promulgating the FRA, the Financial Responsibility Act, which then will constrain us or any other government within the 5% bucket, and also a primary balance.
So I'll get to that particularly because we're in the election year, and we know that but for one other election year, almost all the election years, we have done very poorly with keeping the tabs.
Yeah.
So the question that's actually asked, and I'm trying to also appreciate it, that we are borrowing and we are accumulating our debt, and we're excited about that. How do you explain that?
We are borrowing. Well, first of all, we have to borrow because our domestic revenues do not match that. And then borrowing on a sovereign basis is really global.
Okay.
So the question is responsible borrowing is what we need to affirm.
Okay.
And I think we are doing that. I mean, I think we are at 60 and change percent if you include our energy and our financial services intervention. You X that and you're around 58, 59%, okay? But I think the challenge really, when you look at the Asian countries, etc., it's not that you shouldn't borrow. How do you then move into an export-driven economy such that our net international reserves coverage is not 4 months, but it's 2 years or it's 3 years, so that the vexing issue of currency depreciation does not occur. But I think you've got it. So the confidence in exiting the fund, what we have done with the macro statistics to be where we are, is all leading to.
Do I hear you say that despite the warnings by the IMF and the World Bank about our debt distress being high,
no,
we shouldn't
about
be
the
worried?
Potential debt distress.
So there's no cause for worry?
No, I think...
because I think we are doing how much now? Is it 208 billion?
Yeah. I think your issue is not that you should not borrow. You should borrow with care, you know. And if you look at our trade surplus, for example, you know, you've moved from a negative to somewhere around $2 billion net. You know, those are what then will indicate your capacity to support that. So your challenge is to get appropriately priced funds at the right time to be able to do your transformation exercise, which will then generate the resources. I mean, when you talk about quantitative easing and all of those things that other countries do, it's because they need to inject certain resources into the economy with the expectation that would enhance productivity.
Okay. So a while ago, you talked about how this is the cheapest, and analysts all over the globe are saying the same thing is the cheapest that we have ever had. Yeah. We have this plot that you can watch if you are watching, and thankfully, 25 years of excellence in broadcasting, this channel is now free to air. So you don't exactly need to have a Digibox or to have a DSTV to access this. So you're watching us live. Thank you very much. And the Finance Minister is my guest this morning. So to the very first question I really asked, what is this money for?
Great. I mean, so what are we doing with this $3 billion? I mean, first of all, to be clear that it was in the budget. So it's something that the nation expected, because you go into the budget and you look at your revenues, you look at your domestic financing and foreign financing, so that's fine. And what we intended to do, you know, we have this issue with our energies, and we are in the middle of negotiating this take or pay, which is just egregious to the country. And we came out boldly to say that we are not going to continue with these type of unbalanced contracts for our country anymore. So we're going to put about $1 billion aside to look at how we resolve those IPP issues. That's one. Then we're using close to $1 billion to also look at the various issues that have occurred in prior years to see whether we can retire them so that we reduce the interest cost to us. Then the other $1 billion goes into the budget to look at planting for foods, etc., and rail development, roads, etc. We've declared a year of roads. So really nothing that complicated, but really targeted at resolving some legacy issues and freeing the economy to be more effective going forward.
You're still here on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and we start our morning with the finance minister asking about the Eurobond, and he's just been explaining to us how this is giving us some space to be able to operate and also to keep the economy afloat. So to the question of the subscription levels again, the impression created is that this Eurobond issuance has been dramatically successful, but there are really two yardsticks that are used in Ghana to judge the success of a Eurobond roadshow. Number one, subscription level, and number two, the yield. Subscription level can indicate the level of confidence in the economy, but only if the yield is good. The yield is the most important criterion because that determines the resources we are going to lose in servicing the loans. By these measures, 2020 February Eurobond issue, quite typical because both the subscription level and the yields are very similar, curve to the 2018 one. Back to the critical question. If the yields are plotted on a curve, it would show that our risk profile has remained steady in the eyes of investors. So why exactly is the government celebrating it?
I'm not sure about the premise and opinion all that you have said. I mean, I don't know. I think for any average person looking at where we have come from to now, it will really, I'll be hard pressed to see how there could be any cynicism of this. Let's say last year the 7-year on your chart was 7.875, and the 6-year this time is 6.375. The 31-year was 8.9. It's now 8.75. But I think maybe what is important for us to celebrate is to realize that we are moving towards cheaper financing of the country's paper. And I think that's important for all of us. And I think that illustration of the 2016 6-year paper and the 2020 6-year paper is just, really indicative of what it means when you're able to drive down that resource. Right. So I think we should, I worry when we don't use these indicators to encourage us, to do more in terms of the way in which we are managing the economy. Because in the end, Samson, it's about the economy, all right, and how we have handled it to this
So
point.
back to how it translates to us.
Yes.
And like I mentioned earlier, government overspent, in all competitive election years, 2004 being the exemption.
So you're worried about 2020.
What assurance can you give Ghanaians that the last quarter, we are in the last quarter of this year, government will keep to fiscal discipline? And more importantly, your government has posted average GDP growth 7%, but that is not exactly reflecting in people's pocket. What specific initiatives are you putting in place to ensure greater inclusivity with this huge amount of money coming at so cheap a rate?
I think something you are sort of parroting a lot of the popular narrative that we have here, and it is good to confront it because really I think if we all look at where we were in 2017 and where we are now, it's not. I don't have to sort of trumpet that. Clearly, there's been a change. Now, what do you do to be able to translate all of that so that the famed phrase of people's pocket is managed properly? I have to, as a finance minister, be really focused on macro stability. Whether somebody is screaming, tearing me down or not, I just have to keep my eye on that and make sure it is done. And I think, President Akufo-Addo has essentially achieved that. But even during that period, he was also very clear of what he calls the preferential option for the poor, which is the issue of inclusiveness. So the massive elimination of various vexing taxes, and the interjection of free senior high school, what we are doing with planting for food and jobs. Now, this is not a government that is therefore not aware of what the needs of the people are. And to be able to secure the future for transformation, I mean, human capital is so important, and that's what the intervention is. Okay. But beyond that is creating a society where there's social inclusiveness, which means that you must get educated, and also there's a sense of social mobility. You know, so when I sit there looking at choices that one has to make, when somebody says, well, you don't have the money to do free senior high, I say, I don't have a choice. The president wants that, and every Ghanaian citizen deserves to be able to be given a platform from which he or she can.
I'm still waiting to hear the assurance that we will not overspend in the election year.
Well, the assurance that you have, the beauty,
throw everything away.
Great. Yeah. I'm glad you are saying throw everything away, because then it's an acknowledgement that we've got a lot, yes. And we don't want to throw it away, which is very good. But, you know, we have an amazing team. You know, I mean, for me, being under the mentorship of the vice president, the senior minister, you know, and the presidency, I mean, it gives a whole sense of urgency as to what we have to do. And that is where, unfortunately, the senior minister was the one who was able to ensure that we did not get into this election year. And he's there to guide us. We also, as you know, voluntarily did the FRA. Right. So the 5%, I have to keep at it, or as I lose my job, I'm sanctioned. Okay. And that's motivation enough. So really for us, and if you look at what we have done these 3 years, we have kept faith. All right. With that. All right. You know. So
in a minute, to conclude on this subject of the Eurobond, before I go to, you know, microfinance depositors who are waiting to hear from you that indeed they are going to get their full deposits paid back, to the market woman who is listening and watching us this morning, what does this 3 billion means to her?
Yeah. Well, it means that if your child is in school, this program will continue. We can continue to fund it. If you were worried about foreign currency, you know, this helps with regards to stability. We started, in 2017 we didn't go to market, 2018 we went in July, 2019 we went in March, April, and now we've come in February, which means that we are really consolidating our foreign exchange reserves so that there's stability in there. So for the market woman, I mean, certainly food prices are great. The children can still go to school because we can pay for it. NHI will continue to be better, and that's good for us. And with interest rates sort of gingerly coming down, that hopefully will also give access to bank credit, which has increased tremendously over that period.
So we know that in the bank cleanup exercise, or the financial sector cleanup exercise, we understand that so far we have spent in excess of 17, if my memory serves me right. And we're expecting that we're going to hit up to 20. Now, where is that budget for the president's promise that there'll be full payment of deposits? That's not been budgeted for. Where is that money going to come from?
I mean, first of all, when the president promises, we do it. And I think the magic is for the Ministry of Finance to conjure up the appropriate resources and time our delivery of resources such that we'll fulfill the promise. I think, you know, something that I really think we as a nation need to be clear on. I mean, I was much younger then, but when Kufuor's government came, I mean, we had the country literally on the verge of imploding because of what you called HIPIC, highly indebted poor country. And we have put our head in the sand pretending that it wasn't so, okay? President Kufuor confronted that, and it led to finding the appropriate resources and support to be able to do that. In the same way, when we came in 2017, the asset quality reviews were clear from the Bank of Ghana. as to where we are of our banking system. But the courage to make that decision had not really been invoked. And we went ahead to do it. So we had to do it, okay? So the question is, well, is it the most effective way that should have been done? I'm not sure there's any other way, but everything can be perfected. So given the resources that we had, we then went ahead to spend, what, some 12 billion or so after the 10,000 and the 20,000. President feels very strongly that we should move forward to now close that gap. And so between the Bank of Ghana and ourselves, we are going to do that. I had some extra $180 million at the Bank of Ghana that we hadn't touched. And I think we need about 3 billion to do that.
$3 billion?
Yeah, 3 billion, no, Ghana cedis.
Ghana cedis.
To be able to close
there's
the gap.
some speculation elsewhere that in the end, we might need up to 28 billion Ghana cedis to be able to take care of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, speculation, I can live on speculation.
Okay, but what is your assessment? That's because
I mean,
before,
right now
before you make the decision that you're going to make full payments of the deposits, you would have made an assessment to know how much exactly is at stake.
Well, right now, our assessment, I think we have about 16.28 billion. We've done about 12, so we have about 4 billion CDs that we have to do. We'll see. And with that, as I mentioned, I have maybe 1 billion CDs somewhere, and then I can also add some paper to that.
And these payments will be made in full as promised by the president, and he directed you to ensure it is done. This will be done this year.
I don't know what the president had promised that has not happened. We'll get out
this
of
will
the
happen
IMF.
this year?
It has to.
Everybody will get their money?
It has to happen, It's a toll tax, isn't it? But it leads to also realization of how we should be more circumspect as a country, as investors, as individuals. And that's just a painful lesson.
But what's the wisdom in that? That I deposit my money with a private institution and I lose my money with that private institution because of some reckless acts of that institution, perhaps, and then the taxpayers' money is being used to relieve.
The taxpayer.
What's the wisdom in that? Making sure everybody gets 100%.
I'm sure, I don't know. Samson, the taxpayer is also the person who deposited their money. Is that right?
Maybe.
They are not different people, really.
Yes.
And so it goes to say, but you run a country and there's you want cohesion and you want a sense of peace and people to go about their duties. And therefore, if a government has licensed an institution to do X, Y, and Z, then that institution has to deliver. The issue is that, this is not the first banking crisis in the world, but you need to come through. So the deposit insurance system has now been put in place, so you know your limits. We need to go after people at the Bank of Ghana who participated in this. Fortunately for us, that that moral issue is being resolved. The past 3 weeks, you've seen an escalation of that, so that's wonderful. So things will go wrong. How do you then bring some equanimity and ensure that people can go about their normal duties? So it will be unfair, but you provide security sometimes to certain places you don't.
Is there a specific timetable that the depositors can look up to?
Yes, I think we and Bank of Ghana are almost close to the decision as to when we will trigger it. But the assurance really is that we have some cash that we can use, and we have some instruments that will bundle together to make that happen. We need to park that behind us and move forward, and people feel a sense of security that when a government declares something or when a government manages something, it is done well.
The usual thing is that, the normal is that whilst they were being paid about 10,000 or 20,000, then the receiver will get into action and seek to recover.
That's correct.
And realize the assets of these defunct entities.
That's
and
correct.
That money will be used to pay depositors.
Yeah. So what we are doing then, given that theory, is that we are now front-ending and saying that, okay, maybe we have the capacity to wait a little longer than the individual.
Right.
And really that's what the presidency is saying.
I'm sure that depositors will be very excited listening to you and watching you this morning. Give this assurance that at all costs, they are going to receive their deposits in full, locked up in this microfinance entities. And my very final one will be about the FX Development Committee that was set up, and you co-chaired that with the Governor of the Bank of Ghana.
Yeah.
What do you make of the criticism that came out of it to show that you've actually lost your handle on the city, and therefore, you know, you were at your wit's end, and this was not the best way to do it. You should have left it to the Bank of Ghana because that's their job.
I mean, I think we should be very careful about language. To look at where the economy is going, and for somebody to declare you at your wit's end, you know, it's just such an exaggeration, and it's not fair to ourselves as a people. And I think we really need to mind our language. So where are we? The Bank of Ghana looks at the depreciation of the cedi, sort of the short-term issues, and I sit at the Ministry of Finance looking at, once again, managing the economy into the future. So I'm looking and saying, you know, this perennial 3-4 month cover, which is really good, you know, for a country of ours, why shouldn't I have a 2-year cover? You know, why is this impossible? I mean, countries have it. And so then I'm like, okay, so that means an export and industrialization drive, okay? And how do I turn my traders into manufacturers? Because if that trader Kantamanto is able to go to Dubai, China, etc., to then bring goods in, the intellect and entrepreneurial skills are there. So is there any way in which I can find resources to turn these people into manufacturers? I think that's a question that I have to ask, that I think I need to address. Is there a way of re-examining the retention of proceeds that miners, etc., bring? I think that's a question I have to ask and get an answer to. If I look at the Continental Free Trade Agreement and see now the potential for trade and investment, should I not examine that? Because these are structural, okay? How do I take advantage of the 375 million consumers in West Africa and even Nigeria as a market? I do need to question it. Maybe my only mistake was to have broadened, you know, it, but it's not in any way infringing on what the governor does. And this was a committee which then was going to report to the EPCC, which are chaired by us. So I think there's quite a bit of mischief in there.
That's the Economic Policy Coordinating
Committee. So, I mean, something, when you look at that, shouldn't somebody be thinking of the structural, you know, changes that we need for transformation? And that really, so maybe I should have come out to explain a little bit more. So I listened to the various views on it. I'm like saying, you know, guys, you know, let's get serious about what our future is and change the way in which we manage.
There's a lot that we could ask you about as far as the health of the economy is concerned, but thank you very much for availing yourself and answering these questions for our audiences, particularly the microfinance depositors who will be so excited about the assurances that you have given, except that your critics in the political divide will say this is only because of the election year and it's a vote buying sort of, you know, agenda.
Well, you know, I'm not sure about that, you know. I mean, actually, when we were launching the bond issue, and I'm like, okay, so what's going to happen? So I asked one of the advisors to read Isaiah 43:19, which says that, you know, see, I'm doing a new thing, and do we not see it? You know.
That should be a good note on which we end this discussion this morning. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So we will be right back, and we will be airborne on an Airbus looking for a government official, 1, and intermediaries, 5, 8, name them. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.